Why 200 miles per hour? Trains don't fly off the tracks. At 200 miles per hour, a train feels like it should be doing the impossible. Steel wheels on steel rails. No steering wheel. No rubber tires gripping the ground. No wings adjusting its balance. And yet it races across the landscape with an almost unreal smoothness, often calmer than a car on the highway. It tilts into curves, slips into tunnels, flashes over bridges, and somehow never just lifts away. The reason is not one single invention. It is a quiet partnership between shape, weight, geometry, and more than a century of hard, sometimes frightening lessons. The story begins long before anyone used the phrase bullet train. It begins in mines on muddy wagonways where horses pulled heavy carts loaded with coal, stone, and ore. The problem was painfully simple. Wheels sank into soft ground. Carts jammed in ruts. Moving heavy loads took enormous effort, and every muddy path became an obstacle. Rails changed that. They gave the wheels a firm, predictable path, turning rough earth into something that could guide weight instead of fighting it. At first, these early railways were rough and imperfect. Wooden tracks wore down quickly under heavy carts. Iron plates made the ride easier, but they cracked, bent, came loose, and trapped mud in all the wrong places. Engineers kept searching for a better answer. Then came a simple but powerful idea. Instead of only guiding the cart from below, guide it at the wheel. Add a raised edge to the wheel, a flange, and the cart could stay lined up on a narrow strip of rail. That small change became one of the railway's most important tricks. The train did not need to steer like a carriage turning down a road. The track could guide it. The wheels could follow. By the early 1800s, steam power turned this idea into something much bigger. Richard Trevithick's early steam locomotive showed that iron wheels could pull heavy loads over iron rails. Then George Stephenson and other railway pioneers pushed the system into the age of public railways, where speed, distance, and safety suddenly had to work together. But those early trains were nothing like the smooth machines people ride today. They shook, they rattled, they slammed over gaps in the rails. Sometimes they jumped the track completely. The rails were uneven, iron could snap, curves were often too sharp, wheels were not always perfectly shaped. A locomotive could be heavy enough to damage the track beneath it and fast enough to turn every weak joint into a violent blow. As railways spread across Britain, Europe, America, and then far beyond, engineers began to understand something deeper. Keeping a train on the rails was not just about making the rails stronger. It was about making the train, the wheels, the track, and the ground underneath behave like one connected system. A railway was not just a path. It was a machine stretched across the landscape. The first real surprise was hidden in the wheel itself. Train wheels may look flat from a distance, but they are not truly flat. They are slightly tapered, almost like two shallow cones joined together by an axle. That tiny shape changes everything. When a wheel set drifts a little to one side, one wheel begins riding on a slightly larger diameter, while the other rides on a slightly smaller one. Because both wheels are fixed to the same axle, the larger side travels a little farther with each rotation. The wheel set gently steers itself back toward the center. That means the flanges are not actually the main thing holding a train in place during normal travel. They are more like emergency guards along the edge of the system. Most of the time, the train is being guided by the shape of the wheels and the geometry of the rails. The flange matters in sharper curves, switches, and moments when the train needs a firm boundary. But during a smooth, high-speed run, it is not constantly scraping along like people often imagine. Still, speed had a brutal way of exposing every weakness. As trains became faster in the 19th century, accidents became more dramatic. Wooden bridges collapsed, rails cracked in freezing weather, wheels failed under stress. Loose track joints hammered locomotives like iron drumsticks beating against the earth. The railway became a giant experiment in motion, but many of those experiments were paid for with wreckage, smoke, and twisted metal. The real transformation came when railways stopped being rough iron roads and became precision machines spread across entire countries. Steel replaced weaker iron. Rails became heavier and stronger. Track beds were better drained, better packed, and more stable. Engineers learned to ease curves, control slopes, and calculate how forces moved through a train as it gained speed. The railway was no longer just a route from one place to another. It was becoming an engineered environment. Then came the age of the high-speed dream. In Japan after World War II, the old rail network was crowded, busy, and limited. Conventional lines had too many curves, too many level crossings, and too many different kinds of trains sharing the same space. To build something truly faster, Japan did not simply take an old railway and push it harder. It created a new kind of railway, dedicated, carefully engineered, separated from road traffic, and designed for speed from the very beginning. When the Tokaido Shinkansen opened in 1964 between Tokyo and Osaka, it looked like the future had arrived ahead of schedule. The trains were sleek, electric, and streamlined. Their signaling systems were advanced. Their movement felt controlled and deliberate. But the real magic was below the passenger floor. The track had gentle curves, strong rails, precise alignment, and systems built to keep the wheels calmly centered at speeds that once would have seemed reckless. France followed with the TGV, proving that steel wheels on steel rails could compete with airplanes across hundreds of miles. But the great shift was not simply stronger motors or more powerful electricity. It was a new understanding. A 200 miles per hour train cannot be treated like a normal train pushed beyond its comfort zone. The entire route has to be built as a high-speed world where every curve, rail, bridge, signal, and tunnel is part of the same plan. That is why modern high-speed tracks often look so clean, open, and almost strangely empty. The curves are huge. Some bends are so gradual that passengers barely notice the train turning at all. The rails are welded into long continuous ribbons, reducing the old clickety-clack of jointed track. The alignment is checked and maintained with extraordinary care, because at high speed, even a small dip, twist, or uneven section can turn into a powerful force. Curves are also banked, much like racetracks. Engineers call this cant or superelevation. The outer rail sits slightly higher than the inner rail, helping the train lean naturally into the curve. This does not make the train fly, it does the opposite. It helps guide the forces downward and inward, keeping the wheels pressed against the rails instead of allowing the train to shove sideways against the curve. The trains themselves are also built around stability. Their bogies, the wheel assemblies beneath each car, are far more than simple carts. They use springs, dampers, bearings, and carefully engineered frames to absorb motion without letting it build into something dangerous. At high speed, a train can develop a side-to-side movement called hunting oscillation. If it is not controlled, that motion can become unstable. Modern suspension systems are designed to calm it long before passengers have any reason to notice. Weight plays its part too. A high-speed train may look sleek, elegant, and almost lightweight from the outside, but it is still a massive machine pressing down on the rails with enormous force. Air rushing around the body creates pressure changes, especially inside tunnels or when two trains pass at high speed. But the train is not shaped like an airplane wing trying to lift upward. Its shape is designed to reduce drag, lower noise, and keep airflow predictable. Even the long nose of a bullet train has a job beyond looking futuristic. In tunnels, a fast train pushes air ahead of it, like a piston. Without careful design, that pressure wave can burst out of the tunnel exit as a sharp, booming sound. The famous elongated noses of modern high-speed trains help soften that wave, reduce noise for people nearby, and keep the ride more stable and controlled. The modern reason 200 miles per hour trains do not fly off the tracks is that they are not balancing on rails by chance. They are held there by an entire chain of careful decisions: wheel profiles, rail shape, track gauge, curve radius, banking, suspension, signaling, maintenance, aerodynamics. Each part removes a little risk before it ever has time to grow into danger. The strangest twist is that the most important contact point is incredibly small. Each wheel touches the rail over an area roughly the size of a coin. Hundreds of passengers, tons of steel, and a machine moving faster than a storm all depend on these small patches of metal pressing into other metal. Even stranger, the wheel flanges that many people imagine are holding the train on the rails usually do very little during smooth high-speed travel. The train is guided mostly by geometry, not by brute force. So a 200 miles per hour train does not stay on the tracks because it is locked down. It stays there because generations of engineers learned how to make speed behave. The wheel is shaped to return. The track is shaped to guide. The curve is shaped to receive. The train is shaped to cut through the air without fighting it more than necessary. What looks like a machine racing along two thin lines is really a moving agreement between steel, gravity, and precision. The faster the train goes, the less room there is for guesswork. That is why high-speed rail can feel almost effortless from a window seat. The danger has not disappeared. It has been engineered away piece by piece until 200 miles per hour can feel quiet.